Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Will Lebanon end up like Gaza? That is Netanyahu's warning. His defense minister was supposed to travel to Washington to discuss the war plan. The trip was called off at the last minute. We'll tell you why. Meanwhile, Israel is attacking Hezbollah tunnels. It's a whole city underground. And Arab states are holding secret talks. Can they avert a wider war? We'll discuss all of that. On the other side of the world, China and Russia are holding anti-submarine drills. France has banned Osama Bin Ladin's son from the country over a tweet. He used to live in France. We'll explain. Did Joe Biden abuse Netanyahu? Did Donald Trump send COVID tests to Vladimir Putin? A new book makes explosive claims. North Korea has cut rail and road ties with the South. Why now? 13 American states are suing TikTok for hurting the mental health of children. The International Space Station is leaking. NASA does not know from where, and that is a problem. India's diabetes crisis is thanks to samosa and chips. We'll bring you the findings of a new study. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Japanese Prime Minister dissolves parliament, calls a snap election on 27th October. Prime Minister Ishiba took office last week. His ruling coalition is almost certain to be re-elected. Ishiba's party, the LDP, has governed Japan almost uninterrupted for decades. Spain wants to bring forward the European Union's Migration Pact, asks for the rules to come into force from 2025, a year ahead of schedule. The pact deals with arrivals of asylum seekers and migrants. Madrid is grappling with a surge in migrant arrivals in the Canary Islands. Mozambique votes for a new president in a tense general election. The ruling party is expected to win again. It has been in power for 49 years. Poverty and jihadist violence are major factors in this election. The results are due in 2 weeks. Turkey blocks access to the Discord messaging platform. Says it is to protect children and young people from online abuse. The ban comes just a day after Russia also blocked the US-based platform. Discord is very popular among video game fans. It has over 150 million users. And Wimbledon will replace its line judges with an electronic system from 2025. These judges have been an integral part of the 147-year-old Grand Slam. The Australian Open and the US Open already use this technology. The French Open remains the outlier.
This is a message to the people of Lebanon. Lebanon was once known for its tolerance, for its beauty. Today, it's a place of chaos, a place of war. You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza.
That's the warning from Benjamin Netanyahu. He says the people of Lebanon have a choice: either remove the Hezbollah from power or suffer the same fate as Gaza.
You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza.
Netanyahu couldn't have been more direct. He has every intention to keep fighting in Lebanon. He's deploying more soldiers and more resources into this war. Thousands of Israeli soldiers are fighting inside Lebanon. They're capturing Lebanese territory. The IDF has captured a village in southern Lebanon. It's a village called Maroun al-Ras. Look at these images. These are IDF soldiers raising the Israeli flag in Maroun al-Ras. And why have they targeted this particular village? Israel says Hezbollah had bases there. They were used to launch missile attacks, and now those bases have been destroyed. That's what the IDF is saying. It is also intensifying airstrikes on the Lebanese capital of Beirut. So what's the goal of these attacks? What is Israel after? The Hezbollah leadership, that's what they're after. Israel claims to have taken out 50 members of the group, including at least 6 commanders. Netanyahu says Israel has, and I'm quoting, degraded the Hezbollah.
Raided Hezbollah's capabilities. We took out thousands of terrorists, including Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement. Today, Hezbollah is weaker than it's been for many, many years.
Israel is targeting Hezbollah's chain of command, hitting their strongholds in Lebanon and killing their leaders. Netanyahu says they've been successful. The biggest prize was the group's top boss, Syed Hassan Nasrallah. Netanyahu says the IDF has also killed his replacement, Hashem Safiuddin. But a few hours ago, there was a twist. The IDF released a statement. It said it does not know if Safiuddin is dead or alive.
We struck the intelligence compound in Beirut in Al-Dahin neighborhood. This is the command center of the head of intelligence, Abu Abdullah Murtada, and we know that Hashem Safiuddin was with him. The results of these strikes are being checked. Hezbollah is trying to conceal information. We will know and update the public.
Is the Israeli military contesting Netanyahu's statements? The Israeli Prime Minister said that they've killed Safiuddin. The IDF says they're not sure. Netanyahu is yet to respond to this. Irrespective, his forces are going after high-profile leaders of Hezbollah. Yesterday, they said that they'd killed Suhail Hussein Husseini, the head of the Hezbollah headquarters in Beirut. Husseini was an important figure in this group. He played a key role in weapons transfers from Iran. He was also involved in sensitive projects like planning attacks against Israel. Husseini looked after budgeting and logistics for such operations. Israel says that he was killed in an airstrike in Beirut. On the same day, the IDF conducted another operation. This was in Syria. It blew up a building in Damascus, near the Iranian embassy, in the highly fortified neighborhood of Mezeh. This district has many foreign missions. Israel dropped 3 missiles there. It says the target was a high-ranking leader of Hezbollah. It is not clear if they were successful in this attack, but we can tell you that there were civilian casualties. At least 7 civilians have died, including children.
We were sitting safely at home when we heard the sound of a very loud explosion. It was very strong. We did not know its source at first. Then we heard 2 other explosions. There were 3 explosions. My kids were terrified. I calmed them and went out to watch from the balcony. I saw dust all over the area. I looked from the balcony and all I could see was dust.
So Israel is escalating its fight against Hezbollah. It is taking this conflict beyond its immediate borders. And the other side is responding in kind. Yesterday, they fired at least 180 projectiles into Israel. Today, they targeted the port city of Haifa again. At least 12 people were injured there. Plus, there were several explosions in northern Israel and intensifying clashes at the border. Hezbollah is exchanging fire with the Israeli military. They're using rocket-propelled weapons in an attempt to repel the Israeli advances. So the next few days will be crucial. Israel's defense minister was supposed to be in Washington today to meet his American counterpart and to discuss Israel's plans to attack Iran. But the trip was called off at the last minute. Apparently, there are disagreements over the plan. The US wants Israel to break this cycle of violence to avoid triggering a wider regional war. But Netanyahu has made his position clear. He will not slow down, neither against Hezbollah nor against Iran. Later tonight, Netanyahu will speak to US President Joe Biden. Safe to say, it won't be a pleasant conversation. So Lebanon could be the next Gaza in more ways than one. We've talked about the tunnel cities of Gaza. Well, such cities also exist under Lebanon. especially southern Lebanon. Hamas built the tunnels in Gaza and Hezbollah built the tunnels in Lebanon. It balances the military equation. You see, Hezbollah cannot match Israel's firepower, so they rely on unconventional tactics like using tunnels for sneak attacks. And Israel knows this, which is why their military is targeting these tunnels. One of them was destroyed on Tuesday.
Our forces are operating and locating dozens of underground fighting infrastructures that do not penetrate the territory of the country. We are investigating and destroying them. Tonight, we have updated that we have located and neutralized a tunnel about 25 meters long, which crossed about 10 meters of the fence from the Marwan area in southern Lebanon, near the territory of the State of Israel in Zerah.
A cross-border tunnel. It starts from Marwahin in southern Lebanon and ends in Israel's Zarit. Total length, around 25 meters, that's all. Now you can see why Israel is targeting them. These tunnels allow Hezbollah to sneak into Israel, perhaps carry out surprise attacks. That's what Hamas did on October 7th. They used the tunnels to sneak in undetected from Gaza. So Israel says we must prevent a repeat. Which got us thinking, how big is this tunnel network? Who built it and can Israel really destroy it? Well, the network is quite large. Reports say hundreds of kilometers long. Don't think of them as your normal city tunnels. They're more complicated. There are multiple levels of tunnels, multiple intersections and large staging areas. So it's less of a tunnel and more of an underground city. You have command centers inside, Iranian missiles inside, and hideouts for top leaders, all of them in these tunnels. Some of them are wide enough for trucks to drive on. Hezbollah released a sneak peek in August. Take a look at this. Most of these tunnels are in southern Lebanon, like we said, which is Hezbollah's stronghold. It allows them to be close to their main enemy, Israel. But these are the new tunnels. The old ones are more basic, barely wide enough for fighters to walk through. And what do they look like? Well, let me introduce the Hezbollah Museum, and I promise I'm not making this up. In the year 2010, Hezbollah launched a tourist attraction center. One of the items on display was this tunnel. It's around 200 meters long. The old ones date back to the 1980s. Hezbollah constructed them with help from an unlikely partner, North Korea. The Koreans had dug tunnels during the Korean War of 1950. It protected them from US bombing. That expertise was passed on to Hezbollah. Thus, the first round of digging began. It gained momentum after the 2006 war with Israel. That's when Iran ramped up assistance and special companies were set up for construction purposes. Now, the old tunnels were mainly meant for fighters. They could rest and evade capture. The new ones are home to Hezbollah's arsenal. Most of their Iranian missiles are stored inside these tunnels. And the logic is quite simple. Hezbollah doesn't have the luxury of an iron dome, like Israel does. They can't leave missiles out in the open. If they do, Israel will destroy them. So what's the solution? Store them underground in tunnels. In fact, Iran does the same. You may have seen videos of their so-called underground missile cities. The concept is pretty much the same. Since Iran has more money, their tunnels look better. The question then is, can Israel destroy them, these tunnels? Can they destroy them? In Gaza, they've had partial success. Some of the Hamas tunnels have been destroyed. But every week, there is a new discovery. After all, it's a 500-kilometer network in Gaza. In Lebanon, it could be even more difficult. And that's because of the terrain. Gaza's tunnels are dug into the sandy soil. But in Lebanon, the tunnels are dug into rocky mountains. Hard to find, harder to destroy. Which is why Israel has deployed soldiers. They're basically combing across the terrain, looking for entrances to these tunnels, and sometimes with success. Look at this footage that was released yesterday. It shows Israeli soldiers discovering a tunnel shaft inside a house. Tunnel warfare is not new. It emerged in the 9th century BC. In modern times, it's been used to great effect. In Vietnam, the communists used tunnels to beat the Americans. In Korea, too, tunnels again kept the Americans at bay. In West Asia, this is just the latest theater. It's a tactic used to level the playing field, especially against a far superior enemy. The difference is that Israel knows what to expect. And they're not taking prisoners. In Gaza, Israel tried to find the tunnels first, but when they could not, they simply bombed the entire buildings. Will they do the same in Lebanon? The indications are it could be worse. Months of fighting, tens of thousands dead, and finally the Arab states are entering the picture. Not militarily, of course, but diplomatically. Israeli media reports mention secret talks. Between whom? The United States, the Arab states, and Iran. And what are they hoping to achieve? After all, the US and Iran don't even have direct relations, so why are they talking? To end the fighting once and for all. Not just in Gaza, but everywhere in West Asia. Basically, one deal to end all wars. Now, the details are not yet clear. Reports say that Israel has been informed about this initiative, but they're not involved in framing it. Of course, such a deal involves hectic diplomacy, and last week we saw it. Iran's president visited Qatar. While there, he met Saudi Arabia's foreign minister. Today, Iran's foreign minister was in Saudi Arabia. He talked about ending the suffering in Gaza and Lebanon. Before that, he visited Beirut and Damascus. Basically, it's been a lot of diplomacy. But will the outcome be any different? We ask because we've seen so many peace deals in the last 1 year. All of them have failed. So why is this one different? Because of two reasons. One, it's being discussed on the brink of a regional war. So the urgency is a lot more. And two, because Arab states are involved. They can offer Netanyahu something that no one else can. And that is a normalization deal. So maybe he'll be more interested, especially if Saudi Arabia is on board. Riyadh was part of the Lebanon ceasefire call last month, but Netanyahu rejected it. He has the upper hand on the battlefield, so he won't settle on the negotiating table, not unless Hezbollah agree to pull back. And who can make that happen? The Iranians. Which is why Riyadh and Tehran are talking things out. For the Arab world, the priority is quite clear. They want to avoid a regional war at all costs, because the cost would be too high. Israel has talked about attacking Iran's oil facilities. If that happens, Iran has vowed to hit back, not just at Israel, but at Arab oil sites, like those in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And the kingdom is keen to avoid that. They normalized relations with Iran last year, and they're in no mood to disrupt that. But Tehran is game. They've issued a new threat to the Arab Gulf states. Don't allow your bases or airspace to be used against Iran. If you do, we will retaliate. That's what Iran's ambassador in India said as well. We asked him about the role of Gulf states. He said American bases in the region would be attacked irrespective of their location.
Hope that they play a neutral role. If the tension be between Iran and United States, all military bases of United States, despite of their geographical location, will be Iranian targets.
Including in Qatar?
It doesn't make any places.
That's why the Arab states are worried. Many of them host American military bases, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So they don't want to be dragged in. That may also explain their sudden interest in mediation. They waxed eloquent about Palestine. At the same time, they were absolutely fine letting Gazans die. But now, their own oil facilities and military bases are on the radar. So suddenly, Arab states are willing to talk. Hypocrisy aside, will this lead to anything concrete? Well, right now, it's too early to say. Plus, these are not exactly friendly negotiators. Saudi Arabia has long wanted to reduce Hezbollah's influence in Lebanon, so the Iranians will be wary. In Gaza, things are even more complicated. Suppose Hamas agrees to release all hostages. Even then, Netanyahu may not stop. Not until he dismantles Hamas completely. So a comprehensive ceasefire is easier said than done, especially with these parties. They have spent decades undermining and abusing each other. Can they come together to avoid war? We'll be tracking this closely. Now let's turn to the other side of the world, to the Pacific Ocean, where Russia just held a drill with their dear old friends from China. The latest exercise apparently involved anti-submarine maneuvers, and Beijing was extremely interested. Why do I say this? Because they went all out. They sent their most powerful warship, the Type 055 destroyer. You can see it here, cruising around in the Pacific. That is the Wuxi, one of China's 8 Type 055 destroyers. China has been adding these ships into service since 2020. The Wuxi itself achieved operational capabilities only last year, so it's brand new, state-of-the-art. Beijing also sent out 2 other vessels. One Type 052D destroyer called the Xining. This is also fairly new. It was commissioned in 2017. And the last Chinese ship is the Linyi frigate. It's been around for a while. It focuses on anti-submarine activities. These 3 Chinese ships took part in the drills with Russia. And what did Moscow send? Well, not their latest warships. Russia sent out 2 strong and sturdy vessels. The Admiral Tributes, commissioned in 1985, and the Admiral Panteleev, commissioned in 1992. So not exactly state-of-the-art, but they are specialized vessels. Both the Russian ships are Udaloy-class destroyers, which are large anti-submarine ships. That's the official designation. This class of destroyers carries helicopters to track submarines from the air. Most of the footage you've seen was shot from one of these choppers, a Kamov Ka-27PL, better known as a Helix. We have these in India too. India bought them from Russia years ago. So we know that it's a solid, if slightly old machine. It specializes in both tracking and defense. They can deploy portable sonar to pinpoint a submarine's location and then fire torpedoes or depth charges to take them out. Again, these have seen a lot of action, making them ideal for training. All the Russian machines you saw have been around for decades, since the Cold War. They're tried and tested, which is more than we can say about the Chinese vessels. Even though the Russians did not bring their latest gear, China won't be upset. After all, it's experience that they want. That is Beijing's primary goal. China has often been called a paper tiger. It has a massive military, but no battlefield experience. Chinese troops know how to attack and harass neighboring countries. But there's more to fighting a war than that. And this is why Beijing is reliant on Moscow. The Russians have real war experience. They have fought both conventional wars and low-intensity conflicts, like the Cold War with the US. Therefore, the Russians have battle-tested ships and choppers and battle-hardened soldiers. You can't buy that kind of expertise, no matter how many billions you spend on fancy ships. So China is going to Russia for mentorship. This latest anti-submarine drill took place within the last few days. Russia did not specify the dates, but we know it took place right after another major exercise, the Bebu Interaction 2024. That drill took place just last month, and Beijing is already keen on more exercises. It makes sense when we look at the big picture. China is now preparing to take over from Russia as America's chief antagonist. So who better to learn from than their predecessors? What do you do when you have a famous surname? Either you try to create your own identity or you live your life trying to live up to that name. But what happens when that surname is Bin Laden, like Osama Bin Laden Laden, the world's most dreaded terrorist? Well, no matter what you do, you cannot escape that surname. Ask Omar Bin Ladin. He's one of Osama's 24 alleged sons. And he was living in France until 2023. He was a painter, but last year, Paris banned him from the country. And now they say he cannot return. Why is that? What prompted France's actions? Our next report tells you.
Omar is 43 years old. Since 2016, he was living in Normandy with his wife. During the pandemic, he was stuck at home. He didn't have much to do. So one day, he saw his wife painting. That interested Omar, so he decided to take up art. And soon, that's how he started making a living, by selling landscape portraits.
The red color comes from the feeling and from the impression. You know, in that country there was so long war. It's lost for at least 40 years. And it's the red color, it's is explaining the pain and the bombing.
All was well till 2023, when Omar was forced to leave France. And now he's banned from re-entering the country. The reason was social media. France accused Omar of authoring social media posts that glorified terrorism. Omar has rejected those claims. He says his Twitter account was hacked. Paris doesn't seem to buy it, so he can't return to the country now. Now, you may ask, what was so bad about the posts? Well, no one knows, and France hasn't revealed any details. But there could be another reason behind the ban: Omar's surname. His full name is Omar Bin Ladin. He's the son of Osama Bin Ladin, the founder of Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 mastermind. Osama had 5 wives. Reports suggest he had around 24 sons. Omar is one of them. He was born in Saudi Arabia. When his father was expelled from the kingdom, he moved with him. He lived in Sudan and Afghanistan. And at the age of 14, he started training at an Al-Qaeda camp. That didn't last long. 5 years later, in 2000, Omar left his father's side. He didn't want to be associated with the killings of civilians. In the years to come, Omar has renounced his father's acts. He said what Osama did was wrong, but he was also an apologist. Omar believed his father was a kind man. He said his father felt sorry for his actions. Omar also did not like that he was targeted because of his surname. That's one of the reasons why he settled in France.
I feel release from the responsibility of my father act, and because here no one judged me and told me you are because you are the son of Osama, we cannot allow you to do this or that, or give you work or this. In France, I didn't have this.
Of course, the surname has come back to haunt him. Reports suggest his ban was linked to a tweet on May 2nd last year. That was his father's birth anniversary. Last July, authorities raided his house. He was put under investigation. He then left the country. And now, the Interior Minister says he can't come back. Omar now lives in Qatar. He may have tried to redefine his life, but some surnames are larger than life, especially when it's Bin Laden.
From deranged Twitter posts, let's move to an explosive book written by Bob Woodward. Woodward is a well-known American journalist. In the 1970s, he exposed the Watergate scandal that brought down the Richard Nixon administration. Woodward is now 81 years old, and he's still going after American presidents, past and present. And his latest book is called War. It is about the last 4 years, which means the lead character is Joe Biden. Now, normally, how do you perceive Joe Biden? Old, gaffe-prone, ineffective at stopping wars? Well, he's definitely all those things. But turns out he's also quite foul-mouthed. Now, every politician has a public persona. They dress a certain way, they behave in an acceptable manner mostly, and try to give sanitized speeches. But come on, we know that that's not how they talk in private. There's just no way. Well, Woodward's book confirms our suspicions, with a number of candid rants full of expletives attributed to Joe Biden.
That son of a Bibi Netanyahu, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's a liar. Bibi, what?
Yes, Biden has been quite angry with Benjamin Netanyahu and he frequently abuses the Israeli Prime Minister in private. That is what Woodward's book says. Now, before I go further, a quick clarification. Bob Woodward has not been tapping Joe Biden's office. He got all this information from sources. He interviewed dozens of people with access, White House aides who say that they heard all of this in person. Woodward, of course, has not revealed his sources, so Biden could just deny all of what he's written. Most of the people in the book can. So don't expect anything to change. The politicians will continue to don their well-rehearsed public personas and ignore everything in this book. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, what does all of this mean? Why has Biden been swearing at Netanyahu? Well, it's obvious, really. Biden has been trying to prevent an all-out war in West Asia, but Netanyahu doesn't seem to care about that. According to Biden, Netanyahu only cares about his own political survival. Same with his staff, Netanyahu's staff. Here's what U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken allegedly thought of Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister. According to Blinken, and I'm quoting, Gallant's approach was, "It doesn't matter how many people die. I have a mission to eradicate Hamas, and it doesn't matter how many Palestinians die. It doesn't matter how many Israelis die." Let's face it, if Blinken is asked about any of this, he will probably deny it. Israel will definitely deny it. But what have we seen over the last year? We've seen the leveling of Gaza with our own eyes. American officials have seen it too, so they probably know exactly what Israel is doing, and Biden's private frustration makes sense. So that's one war covered in Woodward's book. Then we have anecdotes from the war in Ukraine.
They f***ed up in 2014. That's why we are here. We f***ed it up. Barack never took Putin seriously. We did nothing. We gave Putin a license to continue. Well, I'm revoking his license.
Biden apparently said all that before Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. Before. According to the book, the U.S. knew about Russia's invasion months in advance. They knew by October 2021. They had a source inside the Kremlin. Apparently, the U.S. tried to warn Ukraine. They even sent Kamala Harris to talk to Zelensky personally, and she apparently even told him to come up with a succession plan in case he were captured or killed. But perhaps the biggest claim in the book is about Russia wanting to nuke Ukraine. Back in late 2022, Putin apparently wanted to use tactical nuclear weapons, and Russia was laying the groundwork, saying that Ukraine was planning to use a quote-unquote dirty bomb. When the U.S. found out, they called Russia directly.
If you did this, all the restraints that we have been operating under in Ukraine would be reconsidered. This would isolate Russia on the world stage to a degree you Russians cannot fully appreciate.
I don't take kindly to being threatened.
Mr. Minister, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats.
Well, Russia hasn't used a nuclear weapon yet, thank God. Either the U.S. was successful or none of this ever happened. Woodward isn't considered some infallible source. In fact, he has a lot of enemies, especially Donald Trump. Woodward has written multiple books about Trump, and Trump has sued him over this. There's a bitter feud there. Woodward took jabs at Trump in his latest book as well, accusing him of sending COVID testing machines to Putin. Trump sending COVID testing machines to Putin. Trump allegedly did this during the peak of the Wuhan virus pandemic when there was a shortage of detection machines. And apparently Putin tried to protect Trump. This is an exchange mentioned in the book.
Please don't tell anybody you sent these to me.
I don't care, fine.
No. I don't want you to tell anybody because people will get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me.
Trump has vehemently denied that this incident took place or this conversation took place. But Woodward did not stop there. He says that Trump continues to talk to Putin regularly. But again, he doesn't have any concrete proof, or he hasn't provided in the book. Whatever you think about these allegations, the new book paints quite a picture. One very different from the prim and proper facade that we're used to. Now let's turn to East Asia, to the Korean Peninsula, where tensions have just escalated. North Korea has upped the ante. It has begun severing all ties with the South. Quite literally, the North Korean military has begun cutting off road and rail connectivity with South Korea. They may not have been in use, but they've existed for years. Now North Korea is severing them. They're also erecting barricades, fortifying border posts, installing landmines and creating a wasteland between the two nations. It is quite the escalation. Why is Kim Jong-un doing this? What has he planned? And should the world get ready for another war? Here's our report.
North and South Korea are still technically at war. Yes, even today. The two sides last fought between 1950 and 1953. In July 1953, they signed an armistice to pause the fighting. It was not a peace treaty, but a temporary reprieve. So technically, both the Koreas have been at war for over 74 years. But thankfully, they don't actually fight. It's mostly metaphorical fist-shaking these days. North Korea keeps testing missiles and sending over balloons filled with feces. South Korea conducts joint drills with the US and blasts K-pop music towards the north using giant speakers. This is the reality along the DMZ, the demilitarized zone separating the two Koreas. On Monday, North Korea's supreme leader Kim Jong-un made a threat. He said he may use nuclear weapons against South Korea and the US. Washington and Seoul held joint drills recently in the East Sea, so Kim was upset, and he threatened nuclear retaliation. Now, normally this wouldn't be unusual, since Kim threatens to use nukes every few months. But today, something unusual happened. North Korea announced that it would start cutting off roads and railways linking it to the south. This was announced by the North Korean army. The army has been active at the border lately, installing landmines and clearing tracts of land. But cutting road and rail access is new. It was broadcast all over North Korean state media. Now, to be clear, it's not that you have a lot of traffic along the roads and railways. Remember, the two nations don't get along. So cross-border trade isn't exactly thriving, and people from South Korea aren't driving up to vacation in Pyongyang. While these roads and railways are almost vestiges of a bygone era, they've been put to use at times when relations improve and the South sends relief supplies. But now, North Korea is severing these connections. That is both symbolic and an escalation. The move comes after a parliamentary meeting in North Korea. Yes, the country officially has a parliament. It's mostly a rubber stamp, though. So the parliament met this week, appointed a new defense minister, and amended North Korea's constitution. Yes, they have one of those too. In January, Kim Jong-un had changed his stance towards the South. He called it an enemy nation, and he wanted to end Pyongyang's pursuit of unification. Unification was written into North Korea's constitution by Kim Jong-un's father and grandfather. North Korea hasn't confirmed whether their unification dream is dead, but the severing of roads and rails doesn't really bode well. Does this mean Kim is preparing for some all-out war? Does he plan to level South Korea? It's unlikely. Because South Korea does have allies like the US, who have their own nukes. An all-out war won't end well for Kim. What's more likely is that he's planning to sever all ties with South Korea for good and retreat further into his hermit kingdom. The isolation may work out well for Kim's regime, but it will further divide the already separated Korean people.
Now let's talk about TikTok, the app that changed social media. There's even a term for it, TikTokification. What that means is that TikTok changed the way that we view social media. It introduced short videos. It brought vertical content. The algorithm was addictive. Our attention spans reduced further. Soon, everyone jumped to replicate this model. Instagram got Reels, YouTube launched Shorts, Snapchat introduced Spotlight. So TikTok was a game changer. It changed the way we consume content. But was it all for good? The US doesn't think so. 13 American states are suing TikTok. They say its addictive nature is harming the mental health of children. The lawsuit was filed in New York. It highlights TikTok's addictive features. The first is notifications, which can come at any time and disrupt the sleep of children. The second is autoplay. If you're watching a video, you don't need to scroll to the next one. It starts playing automatically, autoplay. That gets kids stuck in a loop, and they end up spending hours on the app. The third problem is the beauty filters. They're all over TikTok. Children use them too, of course, and that lowers their self-esteem. They believe that they need filters to look better. And the last one is challenges. TikTok is full of them. Some of those are harmless, but some can be very dangerous. In fact, children have died or been injured trying to take part in these TikTok challenges. So America wants to stop all of this. It wants to hold TikTok accountable. This app came about in 2016. Today, it is the fastest growing social media platform. It has over 1 billion active users. 170 million of them are in the US, which is more than half of the country's population. Users spend an average of 95 minutes on TikTok every single day. That's 1.5 hours a day, every day. And all of this is because of the algorithm. It can almost read your mind. It shows you what you want to see. And that creates a predatory loop. You see something that you like, you watch it, more such content appears on your feed, you scroll more, and you get stuck in this cycle. In fact, this has been compared to substance abuse. And I'll explain why. Imagine you see a video that you like. It makes you happy. Your brain releases the neurochemical dopamine. It's like an instant hit. It gives you a feeling of pleasure. Now, TikTok videos are short, so the more videos you watch, the more dopamine is released. It's like a sense of high. So you keep scrolling. And what happens when you stop? Your dopamine levels go down, the high wears off, and soon you start craving for it. And what do you do then? You open TikTok again and you start scrolling again. It is bad for everyone, but it's especially bad for children. TikTok says that users must be at least 13 years old to sign up. But data suggests otherwise. In the US, 1/3 of the users are under 14 years of age. In the UK, 30% of users are between 5 and 7 years of age, 30%. Globally, children spend 75 minutes on the app every day, so you get where the problem is. TikTok makes itself addictive, children get addicted, and there are no remedies, hence the lawsuit by the American states. It is a good move. TikTok must be held accountable. But why just them? These problems are not unique to TikTok. It's the story of most social media apps. They're addictive and they're bad for mental health. Look at this report from 2021. It shows how Instagram leads to eating disorders in teenage girls. Then there is Snapchat. There's been a rise of online grooming crimes against children on the app. So why just drag TikTok to court? The answer lies in the origin of the app. TikTok is owned by a company called ByteDance. It's a Chinese company. It has been accused of spying and interference. It is banned in many countries, including here in India. And America, too, wants to ban it. They've expressed national security concerns over TikTok. At the same time, in the run-up to the election, their presidential candidates opened TikTok accounts to reach young voters, and it shows you their dilemma and their double standards. There is no doubt that TikTok is problematic, not just for children. So American leaders must walk the talk and get off the app themselves first. Also, if they really care about children's mental health, they should take similar action against American-made platforms like Instagram and Snapchat too, because selective action and hypocrisy will not protect children. Now let's talk about the International Space Station. It is aging, and this has invited an array of problems, about 50 of them. Problems, including the fact that the space station is leaking air. So NASA has gone into crisis mode. They're calling the leak the highest level of risk and drawing up an evacuation plan for the people on board. But the risky bit is this. NASA does not know why the space station is leaking or where it is leaking from. Here's a report.
This is the International Space Station. This is where thousands of scientific experiments were conducted. From finding out why humans age to the discovery of new materials. ISS is the largest space station ever built. It circles the Earth every 90 minutes. And the space station has done this for a very long time. It was launched in 1998. And its crewed operations began in 2000. That's more than 2 decades of work experience. It would surely tire anyone out. And that's what's happening with the ISS as well. It's aging. So, like with any aging body, the ISS too is encountering problems, about 50 of them. The International Space Station is jointly run by a number of countries. This includes NASA, that's the US Space Agency, Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency, and an international coalition which includes the European, Japanese, and Canadian space agencies. These agencies monitor different sections on the ISS, and Roscosmos has discovered a number of problems in its section. There are about 50 quote-unquote areas of concern. Among these, there are two main problems. First, air leaks. About 1.7 kilograms of air leaks per day. But do you know the best part? Nobody knows why the air is leaking or where exactly it's leaking from. Just that it's leaving the space station. The second problem is cracks, about 4 of them. For now, Roscosmos has patched up the cracks. But NASA is in crisis mode. They are so concerned that they have negotiated a deal with their Russian counterpart. They want to seal off a small segment of the space station and only use it during critical operations. They have classified this problem as the highest level of risk, and they are studying how to evacuate astronauts in case of an emergency. Currently, there are 11 people on board. NASA says that the station is safe for now, but they need options for rapid departure. So this year, NASA awarded SpaceX. SpaceX is controlled by tech mogul Elon Musk, and NASA has paid them $266,000. Why? To come up with a contingency plan. But that's not the only deal NASA has signed with SpaceX. ISS has been in the orbit for 10 years longer than planned. Due to its rapid aging, it needs to be pulled out of the orbit. It needs to be disposed of in a few years. So this year, NASA signed another deal with SpaceX. They will give SpaceX $843 million. Why? To kill the International Space Station. SpaceX will devise a craft. It will latch on to the 430-ton ISS. Then the vehicle will guide the craft and pull it out of Earth's orbit. If this is not done properly, the laboratory can fall back to Earth. So NASA and SpaceX have a big task on their hands. Together, they will force the International Space Station into retirement, which seems to be a tradition in the United States at this point.
Now let's turn our attention to India. It's festival season here with Navratri, Durga Puja, Dashera, Diwali, all packed into 1 month. So there's music, dance, and best of all, there's food. So much food. But this time, we say watch what you eat. You don't have to compromise on the festivity. You just have to be making better choices. Because a new report is out. It says the foods that we love the most are hurting us the most. They're causing a diabetes crisis. India is often called the diabetes capital of the world. We account for 17% of the total cases worldwide. Do you know what that means in the world's most populous nation? It means more than 101 million Indians are living with diabetes, and 136 million Indians are pre-diabetic. They are at a high risk of developing the disease. That's what being pre-diabetic means. Now, let me put this in context. The total number of Indians struggling with diabetes is more than the entire population of Brazil. And the Indian Council of Medical Research, or ICMR, knows exactly why. ICMR is India's top body for medical research. Through a groundbreaking study, they have found the main culprit behind India's diabetes crisis. This is a first of its kind discovery, but it's not surprising at all. It's the food that we eat. More specifically, the real villain is the food that is high in AGE. That's an acronym. AGE stands for Advanced Glycogen End Products, AGE. The name itself is scary. Needless to say, it is a harmful compound. It forms when proteins and sugars combine, usually under high heat, like with food that is fried or roasted or grilled. And you know what falls in this category? Most junk food, especially the ones that are fried, like samosas, pakoras, French fries, chips, even baked products like cakes and sugary treats. This food is tasty, cheap, and easy to find. So no wonder that 38% Indians eat junk food regularly. Let me repeat that. 38% Indians eat junk food regularly. But this also explains why diabetes is no longer linked to aging. 93% children eat ultra-processed foods regularly. Among them, 53% eat these foods every day. So diabetes is becoming increasingly common among children, which is scary. In diabetes, the body starts resisting insulin. That's a hormone. It turns food into energy. So when cells do not respond to insulin, glucose cannot be stored in the body. It has nowhere to go. It keeps circulating. It leads to high blood sugar levels. And an array of problems follow. It can cause numbness, heart attacks, strokes, blindness. Living with diabetes means round-the-clock monitoring, keeping sugar levels in check, taking insulin injections, and dealing with the constant threat of complications. The situation is quite bad. But India is not the isolated case here. Globally, junk food consumption is increasing, and so is diabetes. 529 million people live with the disease. And by 2050, this number will double. The worst hit countries are India, China, Pakistan, Indonesia, and the US. And what is the solution? We can keep our own diet in check. That's the bare minimum. It will help. But that's like trying to stop climate change just by recycling paper. We also need to crack down on the big culprits, the fossil fuel companies, in this case, the junk food moguls. We need policy action. Junk food will be, and listen to this carefully, junk food will be a $535 billion industry in India next year. How is this okay? India has been labeled the diabetes capital of the world. We know that it is linked to junk food, and yet we are fueling a processed food boom. It is foolish and deadly. The Nobel Prize for Physics was announced yesterday. There were two winners, John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton. But their victory has triggered the darkest corner of social media, the realm of nerds. You see, Hopfield and Hinton worked on machine learning. They're often called the fathers of artificial intelligence. So physics nerds are not happy. They're asking, since when is machine learning physics? Is it not computer science or mathematics? Many of them challenged the Nobel Committee on social media. They began mocking their decision. I guess this is what happens when you watch too much of The Big Bang Theory. Suddenly everyone is an expert.
What? What?
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In the US, Hurricane Milton doubles in size as it is set to make landfall in Florida. In Argentina, university students hold classes on the streets to protest against budget cuts. And an iconic Las Vegas hotel was demolished in seconds to make way for a stadium. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2004, the first presidential elections were held in Afghanistan. Nearly 8 million Afghans, including women, voted for the first time. Hamid Karzai was elected as president. Since the Taliban took over in 2021, there has been no election in the country. The Taliban calls them a failed experiment. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election. Explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.